Let us see at this moment the miracle of thanksgiving recorded in John chapter 6, verses 5 to 23. If you want to follow this story, you may visit the website lifeway.com. Through living thanks, through giving thanks in difficult circumstances, we are learning to apply lessons in thanksgiving modeled by Jesus Christ. The question is, how can we express genuine thanks in the face of overwhelming needs? How can we express genuine thanks in the face of overwhelming needs? First, do not panic. That's what John 6:5 is telling us. John 6:5 telling us that we need not panic. Therefore, Jesus raised his eyes and noticed a huge crowd coming toward him. He asked Philip, "Where will we buy bread so these people can eat?" Quite suddenly, Jesus and the disciples were confronted with an overwhelming need. Jesus did not respond as if something terrible or unusual has happened. What I like about Jesus is, in this verse, he does not panic. We will always have needs. It is the nature of being human. We all know that. We were not created to be self-sufficient. Needs are a normal part of our life. But sometimes, we can be surprised by needs. Needs can hit our lives with such fury that it leaves us breathless or fearful. Bills come when least expected. Poor health can arrive without warning. Crises often arrive unannounced. It might be helpful to remind ourselves that we will always need something. The fact that some needs surprise us does not mean that God is surprised. Far from being unprepared, our Heavenly Father is well aware of our needs, all of them, all the time. Second, throw away your safety nets. John 6, verse 6 telling us, he asked this to test him, for he himself knew that he was going to do. Jesus asked Philip, he asked Philip where they were going to get the food to feed the huge crowd. Jesus was conscious of the need and already had a supernatural solution in mind, but he was calling it to Philip's attention. It was a test, really. More than any other life situation, needs expose and test our internal support systems. Needs reveal the true object of our trust. Where do we turn for help in a crisis? Do we cry out to the Lord? Do we confidently trust Him to give what we need when we need it? Or do we look for our quietly constructed emotional safety nets? Safety nets are those just-in-case solutions we maintain in case the Lord doesn't come through. The places where we run for shelter and help when we feel abandoned. Or do we look for our quietly constructed emotional safety nets? To a casual observer, Jesus was asking Philip how they were going to feed the crowd. However, John explains that Jesus was really testing Philip to see where he would run when confronted with a need so great that the human safety net would work. I believe that our Father in heaven is calling us to live without our safety nets, no matter how great the need. He desires that we run and call upon Him. I'm suggesting, my dear friends, that at the very start of our problem, call on God. At the very start of our problem, call on Him. Our needs are designed to draw our heart into greater dependence upon our Father in heaven and not upon ourselves or our resources. Number 3, keep your eye on the Lord. Then Philip answered in John 7:7-9, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't be enough for each of them to have a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" Philip ran to his personal ability to feed the crowd, asking himself how long he would have to work to feed the group. He did the math. He calculated. His calculations were flawless, but his formula was flawed. He left God out of the equation. On the other hand, Andrew looked at what was immediately available as a solution. The small lunch was a feast for the boy, but it could not begin to eliminate the need confronting the disciples. Philip was saying, "What can I do is insufficient and inadequate." Andrew also was saying, "What I have is insufficient and inadequate." Not only were the disciples' safety nets ripped apart by the overwhelming need, but their theology, their belief was exposed. They thought God was not a powerful provider, but a distant spectator. God was not an interested father, but an absentee creator. They did not really believe that God would take care of them. They had become distracted from the basic truths of faith. Their view of God had become distorted. Paul warns the Romans about the twisted view of God that can result from an attitude of ingratitude. In Romans 1:21-23 tells us, "For though they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God or show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles." And as a consequence of ingratitude, lost men and women cannot see God as He really is. They miss His glory. They replace Him with gods of their own creation. I want to emphasize at this moment, it is vital that we maintain a grateful, trusting spirit in the face of our needs. Otherwise, our view of God will be skewed and false. We can seek Him and call upon Him, believing in our hearts that He is incredibly gracious and generous Father. The fourth one, choose to thank God for all things. We have been saying, from the beginning of our series, we have been telling this, that we need to choose to thank God for all things. Then Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, so the men sat down, numbering about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, He distributed them to those who were seated, so also with the fish, as much as they wanted. Some boats from Tiberias came near the place where they ate the bread after the Lord gave thanks. That is found in John 6:10, 11, and in verse 23. My dear brethren, the disciples were astounded. Jesus took the resources they had, which were inadequate, and gave thanks to God. It was a choice, And then 2 miracles resulted. First, there was the miracle of the inadequate becoming more than adequate. Everyone ate as much as they wanted. Friends, I wish and I want to tell you at this moment, listen carefully. Your little is much when God is in it. Let me repeat. Your little is much when God is in it. Your talent, your resources, your abilities, offer them to the Lord and will become much. It will be multiplied by God. Second, is that there were the miracle of understanding. The disciples never forgot what they had witnessed. The day after John described a boat that touched ashore near the place where they ate the bread. After the Lord gave thanks, the spot was branded into their memories. They never forgot what had happened there and the lesson they had learned. You know, I like to rephrase what I just said. When God steps in, miracles happen in our lives. When God steps in, miracles happen in our lives. Armed with a deep, fulfilling relationship with God, the disciples realized they could thank God for everything, even needs that were overwhelming or unmet, just like Jesus had demonstrated. And the fifth one, the very last one, we do it together. Because according to our text, Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, so the men sat down, numbering about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also with the fish, as much as they wanted. You know, the people closest to Jesus were his disciples. They were his friends and intimate companions. It would have been easy for him, for Jesus, to have acted quickly to remove all anxiety from their hearts. But he did not. He asked questions and moved deliberately to train their hearts to be grateful at all times. They were, at that moment, they were learning together. You know, I can tell you some lessons can be mastered alone. And other lessons are learned in fellowship with other believers. Don't forget to fellowship with fellow believers. When I have to learn a new lesson, that's one thing. But to walk with my family through a real life application of God's teaching is not always as easy. In my desire to meet the needs in my home, my tendency is to rescue my children from experiencing difficulty. I want to ask you this very striking question. Do you still believe in miracles? Let me tell it again. Do you still believe in miracles? If you don't believe in miracles, perhaps you're forgotten. You have forgotten. You are one. If you don't believe in miracles, perhaps you have forgotten. You are one. According to Albert Einstein, don't wait for miracles. Your whole life is a miracle. Yes, yes, indeed. Life is a miracle. Your life is a miracle. My life is a miracle. Then let's be thankful always to God. Let's tag. Let's tag. Thankful always to God. Let me repeat. Let's tag. Thankful always to God. As long as we are alive, let's be thankful always. This is my prayer.